Oh gosh. Apologies for that. Yeah. Okay. First second of the show needs to be edited. Randy Weir, welcome, brother. How you doing?
Good, Kino. How are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you. How's your day so far?
So far, it's good. It's early here. It's 10 a.m., but we're up at usually about 6:30 every day. So so we're rolling well. The weather's actually pretty nice. We've had a pretty good cold snap here in Colorado, and even finally got a little bit of snow. It's been crazy dry here, but we're uh we're
Yeah.
we're 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 looking forward to spring when it finally shows up.
Colorado. So that's where you're coming to us from today.
Yep, the Rocky Mountain West. I've lived here for a long time, and I enjoy the wild weather that we have here. It changes pretty much on a blink of an eye.
Yeah. Well, it seems to like just be happening like all over. Even here in South Africa. Today was like a clear example. The day started off like a bit cloudy, then it was like extremely hot. Then we had a storm for about 2 hours. Then it's cloudy again. Then the sun is out, and then that's it. Day concluded.
Yeah,
Yeah,
anyone who watched the Denver Bronco game this past Sunday got a real taste of the wild swings. They were talking about that on the radio on the show. Was how it was so warm and sunny in the first half, and it was a blizzard in the second half of the football game. So that really is pretty much Colorado, especially in the wintertime. So
yeah. No, it happens. It happens. Some of us, like me, will say global warming, but then everybody has their own opinion on it.
yeah.
But yeah, it is what it is. It's like one half of your city could be hot, the other half is winter, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
definitely,
makes it,
because, here in town, we're 5,200 feet, but if you just go up into the foothills, you get to 7, 8,000, and even a little bit further, you're up 11, 12,000 feet, and it changes in a hurry. You can get snow up there even in July at the high peaks there in Colorado. So
wow. Wow. That's fascinating, really fascinating. But yeah, Randy, once again, welcome to the show and thank you for taking the time, on your Wednesday morning to come on and, so we can get to know you better and, get to know about your writing career, get to know about your book. You are an award winning author and you focus on topics that I am extremely fascinated about: mystery, crime, suspense, thriller, plot. That like sums up the world we live in these days. My opinion again. So before we get to your book and your writing, let's get to know you. Personally, where did it all start for you? You can start at any point in your life. Even some people started all the way back in primary, high school. So, where did it all start for you? Was writing first up for you? Or, you had a average life and then found your calling?
well, I've always enjoyed reading. I remember some of the early stuff I read. I loved when I was younger. Charlotte's Web, I enjoyed a great deal. The book Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which a lot of people don't know, was written by Ian Fleming, the same Ian Fleming who did all the James Bond books before he passed away, and then it was taken over by others, and then of course you had all the movies and stuff. But I always loved reading, and then when I got into high school, I started writing poetry and enjoyed um, even kind of song lyrics type of stuff. I always enjoyed that kind of short medium, being able to wrap up a lot of stuff in a few words and your emotions. And as I've tell a lot of people, I wrote as a teenager to deal with teenage angst, and as I've gotten older, I write to deal with middle-aged angst. That's kind of a therapy to me. I enjoy writing. I've always enjoyed writing as a way to decompress, get demons out of my head in some cases, and that type of stuff. But I've always been fascinated with books. I was always a big mystery crime. I read all the James Bond, Ian Fleming books, and then Robert Ludlum and the Bourne books were great. And then later on, I found Robert B. Parker and his Spencer series. And that was really the series that said, I really think I'd like to be a writer someday. And then, I read all the, Lee Child and Michael Connelly and, all those type of gritty crime books. And I also liked a little bit of humor in my books as well. My Private Eye is the kind of the snarky private eye who gets, he's getting the rear end kicked and he's cracking jokes. That's his way to dealing with the stress of the situation. So, but I've always enjoyed that medium. Took a big break when I got married, had a child. That was my focus. I was working in the IT world and computers and all those things, and that became my focus. And then I had written some novels before I got married, but they never were published, and included a short story called The Case of the Missing Bubblegum Card with my private eye, Jarvis Mann, which is one of my series that I still have now. And that short story was self-published in 2014, and that kind of began. My daughter was older then, my wife and had her interests, and that was my interest. And eventually I started writing books, and I've written 16, and I've got a couple more in the works.
Wow, 16. And that's the published ones. The ones that you mentioned that you never published, are those still in the vault?
They're sitting, I still have, in those days, in the early days, I actually typed those on a manual typewriter. And I still have some of those typed pages in a safe. And every now and then I pull those out, and it just wasn't good enough. And I've never tried to revisit those stories. They were kind of the beginning of it all. And I look back on those fondly. That were my baby steps to get there, but they would require a great deal of rewriting. So they right now just sit in a vault in my fire safe, waiting. And they eventually got transferred. I have them on Word files now. So I do have the original. I moved them to digital. So I have them, but I think for now they're going to stay hidden away. Maybe there'll be a museum piece for something. I'm lucky enough to ever get anything in the Smithsonian or anything like that.
Or maybe one day, I'm not sure what your daughter does or will do, she'll come across it and be like, okay, let me do something with this as part of my father's legacy,
Well, yeah, and she actually works in the into IT world right now as well, as a support specialist and stuff. So she actually kind of followed in my footsteps there, and she does enjoy writing. She wrote a lot of fanfics on Wattpad, things like that, and got a lot of good feedback. But she's been busy with work and school and stuff, trying to get her degree. And but I think one day she may go down that road. And my wife, she's a huge reader. She reads constantly. She says, I just can't write a story. But she loves to read. She's got her Kindle and she's constantly reading books all the time.
Yeah. I'm the same. Like, I love to read, but I don't see myself in the future to come actually writing a book. I did have a guest once. Actually, I had two guests once that challenged me, to write a book after they heard about, my story throughout the conversation. And I'm like, okay, maybe, but I'm going to need major assistance. And they're like, no problem. When you're good to go, let us know. We'll help you. But yeah, I blog a lot, but there's a difference, to putting a story together. Like, I could probably put like the raw material together. It's just, how do I structure this to make it compelling, for the reader, but then
maybe something like a nonfiction or something. Maybe there's some passion there that you could do where you don't have to make up the characters and you don't have to make up a plot and everything, but maybe that could be maybe something that you look at. But it is challenging, and you're always trying to push yourself to find new ways to write, because there's so many good books out there too that you're competing against, and that's always a challenge.
Yeah, that's true. That idea did pop up, in my mind of, if I had to write a book one day, make it completely nonfiction. But as I spoke to more and more authors, and I mean, spoke to them, they were fiction authors, but there was a link to nonfiction because of something that happened in their life. And what I learned from them was why they went, that direction was because they just becomes more interesting for the reader instead of just being like straight up, nonfiction. Would you agree as a reader, not as an author?
Yeah, I mean, nonfiction requires obviously a lot of research, and there's research even in fiction books too, but a lot of research if you want to get the facts right. Um, I think that's a challenge. I've interviewed a lot of people. I have my own podcast as well, and I interview a lot of people, a lot of authors, and many of them were journalists before they became fiction writers. So journalism kind of leapfrogged them into that world, but it's a different animal doing nonfiction if you want to get the facts correct. And if you're a true journalist, you want to get the facts correct. And that's always a challenge from a journalist's point of view, because it's hard not to put your own spin into the story. Are you reporting about the facts, or are you reporting about your personal feelings about those facts and stuff? So that can be a challenge. But nonfiction, the biggest issue with nonfiction is it generally isn't as big seller as well, unless you're a big name and you're an actor or somebody that's a politician. And even those books sometimes don't sell well; they end up in the discount bin. The fiction stuff is where the big selling is, but there's a whole lot more competition as well in the fiction
Yeah,
world.
yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with everything you just said. And this is just me, looking from the outside, when it comes to books and book sales and what's gaining like a lot of attraction. So you're definitely right there. So you've experienced both eras from typewriter to now the digital era. How was that transition for you?
Well, because I worked in the computer world, I didn't mind. I know it was one of the things I did when I was in high school. I knew the coming age of computers were coming, and I was in high school in the 70s, so there still wasn't personal computers yet. But I knew then I wanted to learn how to type on a typewriter. So I can type. I know there's many people I know that still are, one key typers and stuff. So, and I can type, but it was important to me then. I knew that I would be typing as I got older, one way or another, whether it was books, whether it was work, whatever. So that was a big thing. So that transition was good. And then computers, the biggest issue I think that always drives me mad, and I think it does most people that deals with computers, is that the constant upgrading you always have to do. There's always new software. There's always new hardware. They're always pushing this and that. And so I know when I first learned, I had, and I don't know if you know the history of some of the computers. One of the first 8-bit computer I had was it was a Coleco Atom computer, 8-bit computer. I think it had 16 colors, and I typed on that, and whatever the word processor they had, it then moved into AMI Pro, and then Word Perfect, and then eventually it was Word. So it was that constant upgrading thing that constantly went on. Was a challenge in getting those files moved over as the evolution of the software. But what I enjoy most about Word now is it will it helps me with my editing process. It will read back what I wrote. I can sit there and do the read aloud option, and that helps me with the editing. And then I have an editor as well, and gets there. The biggest concern I have about, and I think all authors have about, the technology now, is the AI stuff. That is very concerning. The big Anthropic lawsuit, which is going on about all the authors' books that were stolen and put into AI to teach it how to write books. And that part is scary. And I think there's gonna be more and more books out there that are written by AI instead of by the author. And that's one thing I will never, ever do. Every story I've ever written is come from my imagination, my mind. But it's going to be hard to distinguish because AI is evolving so quickly. It is becoming extremely difficult to tell the difference between an AI written. You could really tell for a long time. Oh yeah, that was definitely written by AI. You could tell there just wasn't that hard. And I've interviewed authors about that, and they said the biggest difference, of course, with AI written work is there is no soul when you're writing that. Your heart and soul is in what you write, and a computer doesn't have that, but it's getting darn close and getting better every day. And that part is very scary, and the theft of our ideas and our intellectual property is very concerning because then, they're taking that wealth from us,
Yeah.
and we don't make that much to start with.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say emotion, but emotion, soul, they're
Yeah.
same bucket.
It is, and computers don't have that when they write, but they're learning that, and that part I think is scary, and it's getting much, much better. And I think there has to be strong legislation to stop that, and these lawsuits will help, but money doesn't always defer these companies because they make so much. They pay out $1 billion, but they make 10 billion. Well, wow, big deal, right? So that sounds like a lot to us, but to a big corporation, their bottom line, well, that's just the cost of doing business. And that part I think is concerning and needs to be stopped. And unfortunately, the corporate world, especially here in the US, is very powerful. And fighting them is a tough battle.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, any corporate allocates certain funds for a lawsuit, for example, it's already planned like in their budget, as the financial year starts. Hey guys, okay, put 20 billion aside in case we get a lawsuit. It's there. Retail stores, they say, okay, for this financial year, there'll be 5 billion that we can expect to be stolen from our stores globally. It's already put aside. So 100% correct. I mean, the same thing is happening in the music industry. AI is taking over the industry.
Sure.
It's so hard now to differentiate, what is what. And there's so many AI songs that are trending. I mean, these are chart-topping tracks, right? Versus, the independent artist who spends 2 months in the studio just to get a single out. And as you said, not earning a lot, There's so many similarities between the music industry and the book industry. But I mean, long story short is it will never have the emotion. It will never have the soul. I agree with you. It does keep learning. And one scary component of that is that we need to understand as humans, each day that we interact on our laptop, on our phone, it's learning, it's learning in the background, sending text messages to your wife or to a friend. In the background, these technology companies are gathering all that information, how humans are interacting with each other, what words are used. It's getting more and more advanced, and I agree with legislation, but it's just unstoppable right now, and it's something that we just have to, prepare for, embrace, and do our best as legitimate creators in the industry to just be responsible and keep sharing, just what you have shared now with a larger audience. It's an ambitious goal because, I mean, if I'm a struggling author and my traditional books that has come out of imagination is not working, and then I look at my neighbor, for example, hypothetically speaking, hey, this guy is using AI. There's a tool. He can pop up an ebook in like 5 minutes. This man is making 50 books a day and he's putting on Amazon. And if each book sells for 99 cents, times that by 50, times that by 7, times that by 30, times that by 12, wow, that's a lot of money for me. And then we decide, okay, you know what, passion aside, I want to make money. And that's what I don't want to happen.
Well, it's all a money grab. Amazon now has a virtual audiobook narrator now that you can use to create your audiobooks out there. And I have an audiobook gentleman, Philip Polite, who has done two of my books, and he's doing two more. And he does a great job. And it's expensive to do audiobooks. I mean, they get paid. But to me, what he does and what a computer can do to narrate my book, it's night and day. Now, it's getting better, certainly. It would be a cheaper solution for me, but I don't think it's going to be good because he uses different voices for different characters. And I don't think the audio, the AI version of that is going to do that. It's going to be the same voice, the same tone, probably no emotion with each line. It's just reading back, kind of like the read aloud does when it reads back to me what I've written. So I think it's very, very, very sad, and it's going to cost a lot of jobs for people as well. The money, they're talking about in industries and laying off people, and they're letting AI take over a lot of the work. And, this kind of goes into, manufacturing and stuff where machines are doing a lot of the work. And it's a little bit concerning. And of course, anyone who's a science fiction fan and has ever seen the Terminator movies, you always worry about, is AI going to become, this big all-knowing thing someday and go, maybe we don't need humans anymore. So, that part is like, science fiction becoming real. We know a lot of science fiction has become real. Anyone who's read a lot of older science fiction goes, wow, all those things now are actually happening these days. And so you worry that could be the next road we might be going down.
Yeah, TV is your reality, as the saying goes. At the start of each year, like, I do extensive research on trends and psychology, because now with marketing, sales, and branding, it is all about psychology. It has been for a very long time. But of course, it keeps changing, and generation to generation, of course, is different. But one thing that will be relevant, is that people, whether it be listeners on a podcast, readers, people listen to, not really music, but let's just say, I'm going to use a podcast as an example. They want to see you make mistakes, if that makes any sense. So people now can pick up whether, hey, let's just say they listen to a podcast that's not video, it's just audio, right? They want to hear you actually make mistakes. Be like, hey, Randy, okay, sorry, I made a mistake. This is what I actually wanted to say. They're actually listening to that now because they want to listen to organic material. So we still got a good market. Like, there was an AI tool that was released, I forgot what it's called, but it's like, now you can just put in the script and, hey, you got a podcast to upload, so it's also branching out into podcasts now. So I went into the tool and I was listening to these examples and I'm like, it's good, but it's just too perfect for me. I don't want to be so perfect. Like, I mean, I'm still going to be doing the script, but I mean, the vocals are like, I want to hear emotions, from the host, from the guest. And it's just not there. So why would I do this? Why would I want to listen to this? So I want to see where that goes, I really want to see where that goes, or where anything goes for this matter. And all we can do, is just, stay informed, what's happening out there.
Well, and I was going to mention this before, and I kind of got off track a little bit. You're talking about making mistakes and stuff. Your mind kind of wanders as you read, and you go on to that thing. But Google, their whole model is based on data gathering. That's where they make all their money. That's basically it. And that's true now of many corporations. And if you've ever read their agreement, when they're giving you those free email addresses and everything else, it sits there and says, we can do anything we want with whatever data we acquire from anything that you do. So your cell phone, I got the latest Google, and it's got the Gemini and the Gemini. And one of the first things I did was to try to turn off as much of the Gemini stuff as possible. I didn't want it. the Amazon has got the Alexa stuff, and now they're having this Alexa capability where you can have conversations with an AI device, and you're talking back and forth, and you see the commercials for Gemini where a lady is trying to buy flowers and she's talking to her phone, and the phone is helping her make decisions on the flowers and stuff. And I'm thinking that human element is disappearing. We don't connect with each other as much as we used to. COVID kind of killed some of that as well. We know the face to face, and we're all wearing masks and everything. Some of that got hurt. People were working more at home than going into the office these days, and things like that. And it's even going to be worse if all our only interaction is with a computer all day long. That's a little bit concerning and scary, and it worries me. And I being an author, I'm a little bit of an introvert anyway. I'm very good one-on-one with people, but I'm not usually very good in crowds. But even me, I can't sit there and see myself having a conversation with a computer. It just doesn't seem natural to me. I know it's getting more natural because of the way it's designed and stuff, but you and I talking here, it could never be the same as talking to a computer, as far as I'm concerned. And that part that also worries me quite a bit. And we're all going to be just sitting in our houses. We're couch potatoes enough as it is these days, and it's going to be even worse. So.
Yeah, no, 100%, especially for the younger generations, because they're just so glued to the screens these days. When we were growing up, right? I mean, you were outside, you were playing with your friends, you were riding your bicycle, you get to high school, you go into parties, college, okay, the parties are just every day now. You don't get that anymore,
Yeah.
Now they want to chill at home while Netflix is on the TV. The phone is in the hand, phone in the hand, Netflix, phone in the hand, Netflix. And that's socializing for the Gen Zs now, and it's so disturbing. And there's also so many reports on how millennials are looking much more younger and are much more healthy compared to younger generations because of how we grew up, So yes, I may still be on my phone for a good percentage of the day. I'm on my laptop for a good percentage of the day. But I still make time to go outside, interact with my neighbors, whoever's on the street, even a complete stranger. I make that effort for myself.
Right.
So it really is concerning. 100%, I agree. But I mean, back to, a point I want to make, before we move on to your book. I mean, we live in a world of data collection. I mean, even for a musician or an author, because I'm not sure which funnel or strategies you use, but the most basic and common one that any author wants to mention is building my community. So I need to use now Google Analytics, for example. I need to make sure my SEO is on point. It's SEO friendly because I need to get people now to my website. From my website, I need them to insert their details because I need to gather the information. Yeah, I'll give them a free chapter, sign up to my newsletter because I need the information. Giving you a free chapter of my book to get you to actually purchase my book, is no problem for me. That's a right for me. It's fine. What I need is your information because afterwards I need to reach out to you via email so you can join my author community. Everyone is just data collecting,
Yeah. The big difference is, though, I'm not selling that back or making money out of it. It has helped me, at least in my case, obviously. And I do all those things that you said. I do get people, I have a newsletter goes out, and I have people who sign up. I do give away a couple of free ebooks as well, as a way of hopefully that they'll buy other ebooks. But that database of mine is not being used for anything. Now, the service I use MailerLite. Maybe they take that data and use it. That's certainly possible and all that. But yeah, you have to have that, have to be able to do some of that. It's just what you do. Google always had that, their motto was do no wrong, right? They say that, I believe, is one of their mottos, is even though they're gathering all the data, will do no wrong. Well, what is it they're still using all that data to make their money and pay their shareholders and everything else. And maybe that information is being sold. I don't know. And so, their idea of do no wrong be different. I know I get people who sign up for a newsletter says, you don't sell my email address. And they go, no, I don't. And then I make a joke. I said, but I haven't had anybody offer me any money for it yet either. So I wouldn't do it because I'm not there to make money for that reason. I'm there to sell books. I'm not there to sell that data to someone else. But a lot of companies are not that way. They are gathering that data to make their billions and sell products and direct and target it at, anytime you've ever been on Amazon on your phone and are looking at something, if you go into Facebook, bang, that item you're looking at shows up as an ad on that side there. Yeah. Those links, using cookies and other things. That targeted advertisement that's constantly bombarding you. And, I'm not in it for that. I'm in it to sell my books. I want to sell as many as I can, but I'm not going to do extreme measures, or use that information in other ways to make money. I want to make money on the books I'm selling. That's where I want to make my money. A lot of companies do not that way.
Yeah, you're not selling your soul. No, the algorithm is getting more and more advanced. All the big tech companies are working hand in hand with each other. You could actually what you're saying that if you search a certain genre and it'll just pop up all over, and believe it or not, the phone does listen to you these days. If you pay close attention, you mention something, next thing you know, it's on your feed. And you're not even following that person that you were just speaking about with your friend. So it is getting more and more advanced. And for our own mental health, we need to adjust our algorithm. You see something popping up that is just going to bring so much negativity into your life. Say not interested. Search for something on Google that's positive, and then you're going to see that, just filter out throughout your platforms. That's off topic, but advice for listeners. You need to really be careful for your own mental health these days.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk about your book, Justice for the Forgotten. What is it about?
Okay, so Justice for the Forgotten, and I've won a couple of awards with the Justice, and I actually got a little copy here I brought with me today. Always got to have a copy around. So Justice for the Forgotten was the third new series I had started. I had written 2 previous series, and I had an idea for the third series, and I have to give my wife some props because she gave me a little bit of the idea and I kind of ran with it. But she mentioned about somebody traveling in a motorhome, and when they go to a park wherever they're at, there's a murder or something, and they solve the case. And I thought, oh, that seems a little convenient to me. A lot of TV shows are like that, or like Murder, She Wrote. They live in this little small town and someone's dying every week. It's like it's a little so I came up with the idea of a retired Westminster police officer who travels with a Belgian Malinois canine, also retired, in a motorhome. And we travel in a motorhome as well. We have a motorhome. We travel the country at times. We're planning on spending a couple of months this year on the road in the motorhome, going to author events and some other things. So, but that lifestyle kind of appealed to me. And he's recently a widower. His wife passed away from cancer, decided to retire, and he writes this blog. And the blog, you're a blogger, as you mentioned. The blog is how he deals with the stress of his life. He writes about his past as a police officer. He writes about his wife passing away. He writes about his daughter. It's kind of his therapy to put things down. And people discover the blog and start commenting. And one of the early comments was about a cold case murder of a young man down in a town in Walsenburg, Colorado. He's a Colorado, where I live here. He's a Colorado Westminster police officer. And it was never solved. And so he travels down to that town in his motorhome and meets with the parents and says, "Okay, I'll take a look. I'll take a look at it. I'll dig into it. If there's something there, maybe I'll look into it or not." And once he starts digging, it makes people nervous in the area. And there's this cult that's west of there. And we have quite a few cults in Colorado, in a fictional town called Real Celeste. And he starts digging into it, and people are getting nervous, and there's threats against him, and he kind of digs into it, and um, eventually tries to solve this 3-year-old cold case. And the series is going to be his name is Donnie Steele. So it's going to be the Steel Wheels, drives in an RV, cold mystery. So that book, like I said, it won a couple of awards. It won the bronze medal from Reader's Favorite for best fiction crime. And then I won the Global Author Award silver medal as well for best mystery crime as well. And the Steel Wheels, I even have it tattooed, my logo on my arm there, because that's the Belgian Malinois. His name is Kogel, which is Dutch for bullet. And it kind of all came together as well on because I had done a Citizens Police Academy here in Westminster, Colorado, where I live, and got to talk to police officers, got to see their canine unit in action, got to talk to undercover drug enforcement police officers and stuff. And I did a ride along with a police officer and kind of felt his frustration of being a police officer and the struggles they go through and the stress and all that. And I kind of all put that into this series, and it's a little bit of dealing with the mortality of life, his wife passing away, and the stress of the job, and trying to come to terms with that. And it was much more of an emotional first book in that series than maybe what I've done in the 2 previous series. And I was really proud the way it turned out. And some of the chapters are blog entries that he has written, and they kind of tie into the story as it goes along. And I was really happy, and I really like the way the series, and it was really nice that I've won a couple of awards for the book as well. And book 2 I've started on as well, and all the books are going to start with justice in the title. So.
Yeah. And being a series writer, how do you know when to stop?
That's a good question. So and I've got my Divine Devil shirt on here. That was my 4-book series. And that series, I decided to end after book 4 and had a big conclusion and all that. I felt the series had kind of run its course and the characters had run its course. I could possibly bring it back down the road, but it was kind of one of those, I felt it was time. I had done what I wanted to do. I had used the characters the way I wanted to use, came to a conclusion in the series, which I felt was a good way to end the series. And after book 4, and I will say I've had a couple of fans come to some of my book events. I do craft fairs and book events and stuff. And I had one, she was mad at me, and she points a finger at me, and she goes, "I'm so mad that you ended that series." And I thought, well, better to be mad at that than to carry it on too long and run out of, and maybe kill the series by having too many bad books. So I felt like I had wrapped it up. And a few of the characters from that series have carried over into my other Jarvis Man Private Eye series, which has been ongoing. But I think you just, as an author, when you feel like those characters have said what they're going to say, and you're ready to move on to whatever that next one was. And this idea for Justice for the Forgotten was the next one. I said, okay, I want to do that. And I will say the Private Eye series, I actually ended after book 8. I wasn't planning on bringing him back, but I love that character so much. I did bring him back, and I've had 3 more books since then. So, and the 12th book also has kind of begun as well. So eventually I will end that series, but I love that snarky Private Eye so much. I have decided not to put him to bed just yet.
Yeah. And the genre that you're in, at the start of the show, I said all the topics that you write about, I am also fascinated about it. So, mystery, crime, we see this sort of thing happening all around the world, country by country. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate, fiction to nonfiction because at times it's a reality. What Or let me start with this. I've always been fascinated about the criminal mind, and it can be really complex. I mean, a serial killer versus a serial rapist, there can be two different histories here,
But,
trauma related, who knows? What fascinates you about this genre?
well, I think it's very very diverse. It has there's a lot of topics that you can cover. Um, I've never shied away dealing with controversial issues, but when you see something in the news or you see something on there, a lot of times as a writer, it gives you the idea, that would make a good story. So, like in my Private Eye series, I've dealt with stalking. I had a football player who was getting in trouble. He was having concussion issues, uh, real world stuff that are happening. I got into computer identity theft and all that because dealing in the IT world, I was really in that. You mentioned serial killer. I've had two serial killer books, and there don't want to give too many spoilers, but there's a little teaser at the end of Justice for the Forgotten about a possible serial killer as well. Um, and I've always been fascinated with serial killers. I will do events and I'll tell people that ask me about what my book's about, and I says, well, and I've this is this, and then I have a serial killer book, and you'll see a lot of times people's eyes light up, like, ooh, serial killer. And then they ask, is it a real serial killer? I said, no, it's a fictional serial killer, but I did research on it. People are fascinated with that, and I say, well, that's good. You're fascinated as long as you don't turn into one. It's okay to be fascinated with it and stuff. And I've dealt with, the fentanyl crisis that was here in Colorado that's going on around the United States. Is very bad. I've dealt with, crooked politicians and all that. But I think there's never a shortage of ideas in the crime mystery world because unfortunately there's a lot of crime and criminals out there. I hate to say it. You hear it on the news, and as a writer, you go, that maybe that kind you file it away in the back of your head, and maybe that'll work as a story going down the road. I've dealt with military veterans and the struggles they deal with coming home after war, and the issues that they deal with. And I'm not a military veteran myself, but I've talked to police officers. I'm going to have a firefighter in the new Justice who's also a military vet, and talk to them and dealing with the stresses of the job and things like that. So there's never any shortage of ideas, I think, when it comes to crime and mystery. And the biggest thing is putting the right spin on it and make it work well. And as I've mentioned to other people too, is it needs to be true to the characters that you have in your story as well. If that um, doesn't work with the characters that you have in the story, or especially your main characters, then that crime isn't going to work when it comes to what you're doing. So
Yeah. No, you 100% correct. There is never a shortage because it's happening around us each and every single day. I mean, I'm one of those guys. As soon as you mention serial killer, I'm like, yeah, I'm interested, you know. But then,
well,
you,
I had someone who bought one of my, and I have a bookstore online. That's my serial killer book, the first one. It won an award as well, the Front Range Butcher. And then I have a follow up 3 years later about the trial of that serial killer. So, but yes, a lot of people do find it fascinating. And when I was doing the research, it was amazing to me all the work involved, like the FBI and the categories of serial killers and all that. And then you have thrill killers and various other subcategories that I'm thinking, who is it that's sitting in a room thinking up all this stuff? Like, it's almost like a David Letterman top 10 list gone crazy, you know? But somebody is putting all that information together and sorting through it. And there's no shortage of research you can do. When I put in serial killer into Google, it was like, you know,
Yeah.
50 million, you know, things. And then you have to narrow it down and try to find, you know, Ted Bundy. I did a lot of research on Ted Bundy, the Scorpio killer in California who was never caught, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, unfortunately, there's no shortage of, it's just putting the right spin on it and making it unique enough. And then it's writing those stories. There were many nights when I was writing The Front Range Butcher, because I have chapters in there from the serial killer's point of view. And when those ideas were in my head, I could not sleep. So I had to get up, write those chapters, get it out of my head, and then I could go to sleep. Fine. Once the ideas were out of my head, I was great. You know, I wasn't, but they were still rolling around. But you're having to put yourself into the serial killer's shoes can be a challenge. And I had talked to a book club, and they had read my book, The Front Range Butcher, and they said that one of the ladies, that was a question, was, what frame of mind do you have to be in to write some of these chapters? And I almost laughed, you know, it was funny. I said, well, let me tell you. Yeah, because you're having to be in their shoes. And as long as you get it out of your head, great. Don't let it haunt you, right? There's like, you know, you hear about some method actors who get so engrossed into the character that they can't get out of it. And for me, once I wrote it, I was good until the next chapter I had to do. And then I was in his shoes again.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you got like a crazy fan out there in the world somewhere who's plotting a murder, and they're picking, okay, how do I go about this? Hey, let me get Randy's books. You know, that's going to give me direction. Guarantee you, there is someone out there. You know, every mystery crime author has that one person out there, at least one, you know,
Yes.
and gathering that information.
They haven't contacted me yet, thankfully, but it's funny. That actually sort of comes up in the Justice for the Forgotten as well. Again, a teaser where someone is doing something like that. You have a website or you have a blog, and I'm sure you get comments maybe on your blog, and you hear from people. And I get comments and stuff on my website. So far, that hasn't happened, but that idea has come up in my head, and there's a little bit of that in the Justice for the Forgotten, and will carry over into the next book as well. So,
yeah. So, like, I mean, a serial killer, right, or the villain in any mystery or crime novel, how do you integrate that into your characters, you know, because it's either going to be one of three for me: trauma, circumstance, or third one that comes to mind, or choice, right? Or choice. So with your character development, like how do you go about it? You know, the villain in the story, a serial killer now, for example. Which one would you go with?
well, and it varies. So sometimes, I think sometimes if you have a character and they're just plain evil, it doesn't work as well. They need to have some backstory. They need to have a little bit maybe that explains why they are that way. Maybe not a reason for certain, but maybe they were abused. Maybe they, you know, something in their life. Maybe they came from a family where that type of stuff went on. But I try to give my characters as many dimensions as possible. Even the bad guys have good characteristics. I will say, like the Divine Devils, I have Ives. I'm blanking on his name, the bad guy in that, but he's a painter, and that's how he likes to paint images and stuff. But what he paints kind of gives you an idea of where his mind is at sometimes. So that's kind of a dimension I gave him that was a normal dimension, but then it kind of turns back into why he is who he is. And I think even my good characters, like my Jarvis Man character, he can be a screw up sometimes. He makes mistakes all the time, and he gets involved with women he shouldn't get involved with. It causes him troubles. He's letting parts of his body think for him think for him instead of his head and all that. And I think those I don't think there's ever truly any completely evil people in the world. There's reasons why they're bad, and it's true about no one is a uh, knight in shining armor, with all perfect and everything. And I think that's important to give those angles, and we do see those in the bad characters and as well as the good, because I think they all kind of sit and there could be a situation where my protagonist and my antagonist could have been friends and could sit down and have a beer together under different circumstances, maybe, because they don't know who they are. It's just, you know, I think we all have those dark things that sit in our background, and we have all those good things. And in this case, those dark characters are going to be um, a little darker, obviously, than your protagonist, right? Or stuff. So, but I think it's important to do that with those, and give that backstory about them, and maybe give a clue to why they became who they did.
Yeah, I agree. I agree because I mean myself, as a reader, I would want to know that. Or even if I'm watching like, a series or movie that's around the topic, you know, if the author goes back, to that person's life, growing up, becomes more compelling for me because I would want to know, like I've always wanted to know, like if I see something happening, around the world on serial killer now, because now that's what we've been talking about. I want to know, okay, why did he or she do that? Why? There has to be a reason. And maybe choice is linked, to the trauma. It's all just linked, and I feel like, as humans, like you mentioned it, as well, we all have it. It's a choice whether we want to use it. That seed of evil is there. And sometimes circumstance can make that seed grow. I don't know. I've never been in a situation where that seed had to grow.
Well, and people, some people can overcome those things. I mean, some people come out of poverty and are able to overcome it. Some people can be in a wealthy situation and still fall backwards, and it happens. I know when I was doing the research on serial killers, this was the big debate: are they born that way, or are they a product of their environment? And there's a lot of stuff where it's a little of both, and it can be one or the other. Some people are able to overcome those things and grow and become better. And see, I mean, I grew up in a household of where my father was a racist person, and I just never liked that about him. It was just one of those things. When he would speak that way, I was like, I didn't agree with that. I was young then, so I couldn't stand up to him for that part, but I didn't like that. So it was just always even though he ingrained that attitude in me, I didn't see it that way. And I think that's the way some people are sometimes, where they jump out and say, "Nope, I'm going to be my own self. I'm not going to be like this way." Now, there are good things that he taught me that I did get out of him. So I tried to grab the good from the bad, and I think that's true of a lot of people. We grow out of one way or another, and some people swing the other way. You could grow up in a very liberal family, and you may become conservative, and all
Mm,
that. So
mm, mm.
um, we all make the choices, and I like to think we aren't robots that just watch, here in the United States, Fox News every day and be swung one way politically, right? I could watch it and it would be like, no, I don't agree with any of that, where some people do. And it's difficult for some people maybe to think for themselves. And I think, I know with my daughter, I tried to instill in her, she always was a very independent person, and as I was, and I like that about her. I think you make your own decisions, you decide on your own what you want to do and want to be. If you turn out to do the same thing I do, that's great. I may not agree with everything you choose, but those are your personal choices. And I like to think everybody in the world is that way will grow up and decide for themselves what is right for them. And unfortunately, I think we do have a lot of sheep in the world that don't, that, are just going to be, they're just going to follow along with the trend, whatever that trend is, and not stand up. So,
Yeah, we definitely do have a lot of sheep in the world. But I mean, that's great parenting 101 right there. You know, like if you allow your child, like myself included, my parents allowed me to make my own choices. And then I realized, okay, this choice was a mistake. And then you realize, okay, what your parents said there. But it's good it's good that I made that mistake, because then you learn from it. And you're like, okay, make better decisions next time. Instead of just being like totalitarian, do this, do this, do this, because it's just so unhealthy. And I've seen it happen in the real world. Then the child goes out into the real world and becomes a serial killer, because they were in their cage for so long, you know? They were in their cage for so long, and then they go into the real world and they just let loose, but they're letting loose doing all the wrong things. And that's the history of that serial killer.
that's right.
Yeah. Sure, we can go on and on about this topic. It's unlimited. As you said, it's unlimited on what you can actually speak about. And you are going to keep getting more and more ideas in this world that we live in. That's no doubt. You're in a trending genre, that's for sure. So, when is your next book expected to come out?
Well, actually, my next book just came out a couple weeks ago. So it's the
Oh,
11th.
already.
Yeah, that just came out January 13th. Mayhem in Music City. That's book 11 in the Jarvis Man Private Eye series, which is my snarky private eye, first person through his eyes and all that. And he goes to Nashville, Tennessee, helping out a fictional country western husband and wife duo, rule of law. A little bit of threats against them, and their main security man was injured, and Jarvis goes out there to help a friend who is part of the security team and investigates and gets into a world of issues, lots of stuff. My book's always, it's never one thing, it's always several things that kind of roll into the story to make a fairly complicated storyline. But it's his usual snarky attitude, banter, tough, a little humor, and I enjoy writing. And then I'm working on the next Justice book, and I've actually started a little bit of the 12th book in the Jarvis series as well. So I've actually kind of been bouncing back and forth between two books right now. But the next Justice, which is going to be Justice for the Accused, is going to be out in sometime this next year.
So you got a busy year ahead of you.
Yeah, it's my I'm pretty much retired. I'm retired these days, so I spend most of my time, other than I do a lot of stuff around the house and stuff to keep things, because my wife works in the office from home next to me, and for her job, and my daughter works down in the basement, and my job is to keep putting out the books.
Your house is just one big office.
That's right. Everybody's here, which we do get out of the house though from time to time, and we'll be going to an event in Tucson, Arizona in March, where we'll be gone for 2 weeks for a big author. I was invited down there as one of 200 independent authors, and to get to sell my book, Justice for the Forgotten. And hopefully maybe I'll get on a panel or two, and there's a lot of big name authors that'll be down there as well. And hopefully I can get them to be on my podcast.
Yeah. Nice. Well, Randy, I wish you all the best, with your books and the book that's just been released, the books that are already released, and the books to come, just your career overall. You're really, truly a fascinating individual. No doubt about that. So you mentioned a bookstore, which means you have your own website where people can purchase directly from you, and obviously you're on Amazon. Are those the two places where listeners can find you the most?
Yeah, so all my books are exclusively on Amazon. So they're available as ebooks for Amazon. You can buy the paperbacks for Amazon. They are available under the Kindle Unlimited umbrella if anyone pays for that subscription service. All I ask is go through each page because they pay you by the page for Kindle Unlimited. So if you don't like the book, at least read all through all of them and stuff. And then I do have a website. It's R Weir, so RWEIR author.com. And on there is a bookstore for buying signed paperbacks. Unfortunately, only here in the US because it's too expensive to ship books overseas unless somebody or other nations, unless you really want to pay a whole lot of money to get one of my books. So their best bet is to then order it from the Amazon site on their whatever part of the world that they're in. But yeah, those are great. And I have other merchandise too. I have a stuffed Kogel doll that my wife and daughter makes from our Belgian Malinois you can buy. And we have bags with the various logos on them. We will soon have t-shirts and mugs as well. So not just books. And anyone who signs up for my newsletter gets 2 free ebooks that they can download through BookBub as well. So to test it out. So
Nice. I'll be one of those individuals.
well, I appreciate it. Yeah, and my newsletters they go out like once a month, and I have a little personal stuff in there. I talk about the writing process. I talk about things I'm doing other than writing. I do a lot of work in our garden, in our yard, in the house. Sometimes there's pictures of that. Some of the traveling, I put pictures of people who bought books at events, and then I tell stories about any new books that are coming out, and then there's usually links in there to other free ebooks from other authors. And I also usually do a author feature about another author in my newsletter as well, where a lot of times you can learn about different types of authors as well. And I talk about my own podcast, Bringing Life to Characters. So
Nice. I mean, you've just briefly explained, for any up and coming independent author out there, how to actually create a successful career for themselves. Just build a community, stick with the community, bring them into your day to day. Don't only talk about, my books and my career, but the day to day. It's so important. Well, Randy, thank you so much for taking the time once again. This has been great. And yeah, all the best.
Actually, having me on.
We'll definitely be signing up for your newsletter.
Fabulous. Thank you. Appreciate you having me on your show. Enjoyed talking with you across the big expansive ocean there.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned technology throughout the show, but this is the advantages of technology,
Yeah. Yeah. And thankfully it pretty much the connection held. So
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. No, compared to yesterday, it was bad, but today is perfect.
yeah.
Randy, thank you so much. As I tell all the guests that come on the show, it's never goodbye. Catch you later.